Hello, and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you joined us for the Life Sciences Investor Forum. Our next presentation of the day is from Amplia Therapeutics. Please note you may submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides, and you can view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings by clicking Book a Meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Chris Burns. He's the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Amplia Therapeutics, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol INNMF and on the ASX under the symbol ATX. Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you, John, and thank you everybody who's joined this presentation today. So I'm very happy to present a summary of Amplia Therapeutics' programs in pancreatic cancer to the forum today. And I'll move through the disclaimer and start at the executive summary. So Amplia is developing a pipeline of molecules that target a protein called FAK. FAK is a protein, I'll speak a little bit more about that, that's overexpressed in a range of cancers. Our lead asset is a drug called narmofotinib. It's currently in phase 2 studies in pancreatic cancer. We believe it is the best-in-class FAK inhibitor in development. There are 2 other FAK inhibitors in clinical development. And we've got to date some really promising data from a clinical study that we've been running called the ACCENT clinical trial that demonstrate that the drug has good efficacy, durability, and tolerability. We've recently opened a second trial in pancreatic cancer in the US and in Australia. There's 2 sites already open in Australia and sites in the US are opening imminently. And we have fast track and orphan drug designation from the US FDA. A little bit about the team involved. We have a very experienced board in Warwick Tong, Robert Peach, Jane Bell, and myself. Warwick, Robert, and I have all worked in pharma and biotech for most of our careers. You can see on the left, Warwick started his career at GSK, worked for a company called Surface Logics for a number of years in Boston, excuse me, and was responsible in taking this drug, Rezurock, to the clinic, and that's now approved. Robert Peach was a founder of Receptos after a long career at a number of companies, and he was one of the drivers taking that drug, Zeposia, to approval. And I was involved in the discovery and development of Ojara, which has recently been approved as well. Our 4th board member, Jane Bell, is a corporate lawyer, long career in corporate and finance law and in governance of medical and healthcare companies. And she is indeed the chair of Mesoblast, as well as being on our board. In terms of senior management, a lot of experience there in our team, but I won't elaborate further on that. So let me talk a little bit about pancreatic cancer, and in particular metastatic pancreatic cancer. This is obviously a disease that we all know, and most forums that I present to, there's at least somebody who's been directly impacted by pancreatic cancer, knowing a family member or loved one who's been impacted by the disease. It's still considered a rare disease, over 60,000 new diagnoses in the US. This year are predicted about 65,000, but incidence is increasing, unfortunately. The majority of patients are diagnosed at the metastatic stage, and that could be 60-70% of patients with cancer have metastatic disease, meaning that the disease has moved from the pancreas into other parts of the body. The 5-year survival, as I've got there, is probably less than 3%. So it's a very challenging disease to treat. Current treatments are focused on chemotherapy, and there are 2 main chemotherapy options. There's either gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel, and that is a reasonably well-tolerated treatment. It does lead to an increase in progression-free survival of 5.5 months, as I show there, and a median overall survival of about 8.5 months. And there's another treatment called FOLFIRINOX, a more aggressive treatment that's less well tolerated by patients, but it does give a slight improvement in terms of progression-free survival and overall survival of 6.4 months and 11.1 months respectively. Either way, the outcomes here are not fantastic. As I've shown here at the bottom, the vast majority of patients are either getting gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel, sometimes called Abraxane, gemcitabine, or a FOLFIRINOX type regimen. So over 3/4 of patients are treated with that as first-line treatment for metastatic disease. So we're currently developing our drug in combination with either gemcitabine, Abraxane, or FOLFIRINOX, and I'll show you the data we've generated to date with the gemcitabine nab-paclitaxel combination. So FAK inhibition, why do we think this is a way to target pancreatic cancer? Well, first of all, this particular protein is overexpressed in pancreatic cancer. We know from looking at patients and their tumours that the patients who have higher levels of FAK, just by natural variation, have a worse outcome. So that's a sort of genetic evidence of what we're trying to achieve. We know that also FAK as a protein supports things like tumour growth, tumour metastasis, and indeed treatment resistance. On top of that, FAK is also involved in creating a very fibrotic and immune-suppressed microenvironment. So pancreatic cancer tumours are really surrounded by a very thick fibrotic tissue. I kind of imagine it in my mind as like a bird's nest, very thick scar tissue that makes it difficult for drugs and the immune system and your own immune system to actually penetrate through that scar tissue into the tumour itself and kill the cancer cells. Our drug actually relaxes and shortens that the fibers that make up that bird's nest, if you like. So making that microenvironment more permeable, which means that you can get better immune attack of the cancer cells, but also importantly, you can get better penetration of drugs into the tumour tissue and the tumour cells themselves. So as shown in this cartoon here, we've got this immune suppressed microenvironment. You've got the blue cells that are the cancer cells. When we treat with our FAK inhibitor, and then we treat with chemotherapy, which is what we do in our study, you can see here in this sort of cartoon, we've gone now from this immune suppressed environment to now immune reactive cells attacking the cancer. We've got a lot more dead cancer cells in these grey cells. And we've broken down some of that fibrosis, that fibrotic tissue, to allow these processes to occur. So that's very simply what we're trying to do. We're modulating the immune microenvironment and we're affecting the cancer cells themselves so that the chemotherapy can get in and work better. Our drug, narmefotinib, which is an inhibitor of FAK, is very potent and selective in laboratory tests. It is what you'd call a drug-like small molecule, meaning that we dose the drug as a capsule to patients, so it's taken by mouth once a day. It has very good properties within the body, so once a day dosing gives you sufficient dose to actually inhibit the FAK protein. The drug itself is stable, stored at room temperature, can be stored there for a number of years without degrading. There's no evidence, importantly, that our drug interacts with other drugs to date. So it can be taken in combination with other medicines. That's important. A lot of pancreatic cancer patients are elderly, will have other comorbidities and be taking other medications. So the fact that our drug combines and, if you like, plays nicely with other medications is important. And in our preclinical and clinical studies, we've actually shown that even by taking the pill by mouth, that we can get the pill distributing into tissues, and the FAK inhibitor actually does block the activity of that protein, that FAK enzyme. So we've shown that in both preclinical and clinical studies. So our ACCENT trial in pancreatic cancer that I mentioned excuse me, is a study in first-line pancreatic cancer patients who have got metastatic disease. We've run that trial here in Australia and in Korea. The objective of the study has been to show that the combination of nalmeflotinib with the chemotherapies gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel is tolerated, it's safe, and importantly that it has activity in this patient population. And our key readout has been this ORR, objective response rate, which has been measured by RECIST 1.1, which is the international standard criteria. A little bit about our patient population. So this study, the phase 2 portion of this study has been with 55 patients. There's almost a one-to-one mix of Australian and Korean patients been on board, essentially one-to-one mix of males to females and a median age of 64. All patients have pretty good performance characteristics. So this reflects the fact that a lot of these patients, that all these patients are newly diagnosed, but a lot of them have really been diagnosed without any prior indication that they had any disease whatsoever. So that's the breakdown of the patients. I'm now going to show you some of the key data. So this was an analysis we announced in August. This is progression-free survival. This figure hasn't changed, though we haven't done the formal analysis since this time, but we believe this is an appropriate number of 7.6 months. So this is a full 2 months clear for what you would expect for patients receiving chemotherapy alone. So chemotherapy alone, the progression-free survival, as I mentioned before, the median progression-free survival is 5.5 months. That data really hasn't changed over 10 years, and it's been done a number of times. We compare our data with the study that was published in 2013 called the MPACT study, and we've modelled our clinical trial exactly as MPACT was run, so the same inclusion-exclusion criteria, the same treatment approach as well. So we think it's a very fair comparison to be comparing with the MPACT study. And a 2-month improvement, it might sound a lot, but it's very meaningful for patients. It's also meaningful for regulators. The FDA recently approved another drug in pancreatic cancer called Nalirifox. That drug was approved on a 2-month improvement in overall survival. So that is meaningful in this patient population where the outcome is so aggressive. So PFS of 7.6 months, that's the first piece of data. Secondly, I wanted to talk about objective response rate. That's the key and primary readout of this study. And importantly, we've had one complete response. So one patient where the appearance of tumor has disappeared entirely after looking at their tumors every 2 months. So essentially, this patient was cancer-free for a period of time, at least for 2 months. These are all confirmed responses. We've had 18 confirmed partial responses, so that's slightly updated to what we've reported in the past. A confirmed partial response means that the tumour size is reduced by greater than 30% and been sustained for 2 months or more. So we've had now 18 confirmed partial responses. One of those patients actually then left the study and had the remaining little piece of tumour that was apparent removed surgically. And once that was examined under pathological conditions, it actually wasn't tumour tissue at all. So that patient was what's called a pathological complete response. So that's a very unusual and rare event in pancreatic cancer and very, very exciting, obviously. If you add all that together, that's 19 patients out of 55, so a confirmed objective response rate of 35%. That compares very favourably with the MPACT data, which was a confirmed a response rate of 23%. So we've got a 35% response rate. If we roll in all patients who showed a reduction in tumour size of greater than 30%, that's a response rate of 42%. So again, comparing very favourably with historical data and indeed data from other studies. If you add up all the responses, so confirmed response, complete response, partial response, and stable disease, you get a disease control rate of 76%, which again is a very exciting number. So at this point in time, the data is looking very positive in terms of efficacy and in terms of durability. I wanted to speak a little bit about the tolerability, and there's a lot more data here, but what we're looking at here is percentage of adverse events that are grade 3 or above. So these are the serious adverse events. And what we're comparing here in light blue is what we see in our study. So narmefotinib on top of gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel. And we're comparing that with the adverse events grade 3 or above that you see for the chemotherapy alone, which is in dark blue. And across a range of different readouts, neutropenia, anemia, diarrhea, peripheral neuropathy, and so on and so forth, you can see that the adverse event percentage is no different, and in some cases smaller than what you see for chemotherapy alone. So this data is showing us that our drug is well tolerated by patients and is not actually adding to any additional burden that the patients see, and particularly is not adding to the burden that they're receiving from the chemotherapy alone, which I think is really important given the aggressiveness of the disease. So the take home from all of those three is really shown in this Venn diagram. So we've got a lot more data that we could speak to, but for today's presentation, really pointing out that the combination of efficacy, durability, and tolerability is really where narmefotinib is sitting, showing this deeper efficacy, this prolonged effect in terms of the PFS, and the drug is well tolerated. So that's where we see a really key data from the trial. As we look to the future, narmefotinib, because its profile has been so promising from the study with gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel, that is a combination with chemotherapy. We've started a second study looking at a combination with a different chemotherapy, and I'll talk about that in a moment. We are very interested in other modalities that are in development for pancreatic cancer. So KRAS inhibitors will be an area that a lot of the audience will be familiar with. These are, again, small molecule drugs that are being developed in pancreatic cancer. These are showing some really promising effects in early stage studies. We've shown, and we continue to do work preclinically to demonstrate that our FAK inhibitor actually enhances the activity of the KRAS inhibitor and blocks resistance pathways. So we see there's a potential for development in combination with KRAS inhibitors. There's also very clear evidence that combining a FAK inhibitor with an antibody drug conjugate, again, another area that there's been a lot of clinical development in recent years in cancer. These are essentially targeted chemotherapies, but they're attached to a large biomolecule, and that biomolecule can't actually penetrate through this scar tissue that is present in pancreatic cancer. Our drug breaks that down, and there's evidence clearly that if you break down that scar tissue, you get better penetration of antibody drug conjugates. So these are two areas where we're seeing development in pancreatic cancer that we think narmefotinib can enhance those activities. There's clear evidence that narmefotinib enhances the effect of radiotherapy and indeed immunotherapy from preclinical studies, and we've got some of that data ourselves. So we think that narmefotinib can be positioned as an agent that can be used in combination with a number of different treatment types in pancreatic cancer. And indeed, if you think more broadly in other solid tumours where there is a high FAK involvement, and often you get where there's this scar tissue, so things like ovarian cancer, head and neck cancer, gastric cancer, liver cancer would be obvious areas for further development. We have a lot of interest from clinicians, particularly in the ovarian cancer space, and we're speaking actively with those now about ways that we can develop the drug in ovarian cancer through an investigator-initiated trial. So that's something to watch in terms of development. I did mention we've started this second study in metastatic pancreatic cancer again. This is a study that now is under a IND and open in the US and Australia. Well, the sites in the US, we've got 5 sites across the US that are in very late stages of opening, and we expect some sites to open either late this year or early in 2026. And we've got 2 sites already open in Australia. So actually a couple of patients have already started dosing in this study. So this is where we're giving our drug on top of the chemotherapy FOLFIRINOX, a more aggressive chemotherapy, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, leading to hopefully improved outcomes for those patients. This is built on very promising preclinical data. We have a 2-part process for this clinical study. So there's first a dose escalation phase. It will be up to 27 patients. And then a dose expansion phase of 40 patients where we're comparing 2 doses side by side. As I said, 2 sites are already open in Australia, and this study, the Amplicity trial, now has a website, amplicitytrial.com, if you were interested in looking further into that study. It should be noted this is how this trial works. So it's slightly different to the Accent trial. The chemotherapy is given on a 14-day cycle. On day 1, day 2, day 3, our drug is taken by the patients every day. So in terms of future milestones, I'm happy to say that we've hit all the milestones that we set ourselves through 2025. We finished actually only recruitment of the Accent study at the beginning of 2025. We reported top-line data in Q3. We're now in Q4. I've given a little bit of an update today. We expect to report mature data at the end of Q1 2026, so March 2026. By this time, all patients who've been on study would have been on study for at least 12 months. So we hope to be able to speak to some overall survival data at that point in time, in addition to more mature data around safety, tolerability, and indeed progression-free survival as well. We anticipate the trial to end in mid to late Q3 of 2026. And during this year, we will work on planning the initiation of a phase 2b/3 trial, which we anticipate to start at this time next year. So this is where we'll be combining nalmeflotinib daily dosed with gemcitabine and nab-paclitaxel in a controlled clinical study. And we're now working with the FDA and indeed other regulators on the design of that trial, and the patient numbers and where indeed that'll be run. But it'll be run at least in Australia, the Asia Pacific region, Korea. We've had very good experience with running our trial in Korea, but also in the US, possibly Europe as well. So a lot of work will happen through 2026 to work toward starting this clinical study. In addition, we're running the Amplicity study, as I mentioned. That's recently started. We started dosing at the beginning of Q4. We expect there to be a dose escalation phase. Probably we're not going to get that done by the end of this year, but early 2026. Complete that dose escalation, and then a 2-dose comparison will start sort of mid-year, sometime in Q3, to compare 2 doses in combination with FOLFIRINOX. So that study is going on in the background. As I mentioned, we do have the opportunity of picking up some investigator-initiated trials in ovarian cancer as well. So that's not something that we'll be funding directly ourselves at this point in time, but working with other groups to get some off-book funding. So that's where I want to leave it. The company is funded currently into 2027. We completed a raise midway through this year and have the funding to complete both the Accent and Amplicity trial. We will be looking to reach out to investors through 2026 regarding funding for this phase 2b/3 study. So with that, I'm going to finish. I'd like to thank you for your attendance today. I see I've got a number of questions, so thank you very much for your attention. This presentation is actually on the company website too. But if I go through the questions that have come up, I've got one question here. Do we anticipate any additional complete responses? Complete responses are really unusual in pancreatic cancer. In that MPACT study that I mentioned that we compare directly against, they had one complete response in 400 plus patients. So we've had one complete response in 55 patients with an additional pathological complete response. So we've had a good outcome there. I think it's unlikely we'll see another complete response, but we never say never. There are still patients on study. I've got another question here. How are you planning to convert the ACCENT and Amplicity into a clear registration pathway in the US and Europe? The Amplicity study will run in parallel, but the goal is to move forward with the combination that we're exploring in the ACCENT trial. So this is the combination of namafotinib with gemcitabine and Abraxane. Obviously, any data that we learn from Amplicity that can inform dosing regimen, safety, tolerability issues, pharmacokinetics and the like, will factor into the design and the running of the ACCENT trial, but really the Amplicity trial will sit separate to that. I have an extra question here. What is the durability of benefit and long-term safety seen in patients who remain in treatment beyond 12 months? That's a really good question. What I can tell you is that namafotinib has been to date very well tolerated, and anecdotally, the clinicians who are running the study have said to me from a tolerability perspective, the drug is essentially benign. We do see a little bit of fatigue, a little bit of nausea potentially associated with the drug, but really nothing compared to what those patients are putting up as a consequence of their disease and the chemotherapy, as I've shown to date. Longer term, really the main challenges with the treatment is indeed the chemotherapy, and we have had some patients who've left study because of toxicity from the chemotherapy. So I think that's something we're thinking about in terms of managing chemotherapy toxicity by allowing maybe reductions in the dose of some of the chemotherapy, or indeed dropping out some of the chemotherapy permanently, or dropping it out on through the cycles that the patients are seeing or being dosed with the chemotherapy. Another question here. How large is the addressable market for namafotinib in first-line metastatic pancreatic cancer? Look, the total market in pancreatic cancer is about $3 billion at the moment. That's expected to, over the next decade, to go above $10 billion. Of that, probably 60% of the market is for metastatic disease. So we think there's a very large market. And as I said, we believe there's a real opportunity here to have namafotinib as a sort of baseline treatment that sits along with patients through the treatment journey. So we believe the market is very large indeed, and we've got some modelling that can speak to that. But definitely, the target market itself moving up to sort of that $10 billion figure over the next 10 years. So there's a question here. Do you have any academic and strategic partners? So we do have a number of partners in academic labs that we work with closely. So some of the work we've done to date has been with a academic, very expert academic lab in pancreatic cancer here in Australia. We have a really good collaboration with a team at UC San Diego, and we're working with other people in both pancreatic cancer and ovarian cancer. So with that, unfortunately, I haven't got through to all the questions, but I do thank you for your interest. You can reach me at my email here, chris@Amplia ATX, and thank you again for your attendance.